T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Hey, Chris, this shit's fun.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Hey, Chris, this shit's fun.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT, and we got a lot of things that we got to talk about today as I fix my hair, man, because, man, the Atlanta Falcons hired a new head coach, and it's not who anybody was expecting. Most of us thought that they were going to go ahead and name Bill Belichick their new head coach. Their owner came out and said that he wanted an experienced, proven head coach. So what did they do? They don't get Bill Belichick. You would think either Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, but they decide to hire Raheem Morris. I got some interesting thoughts on that hire. The Carolina Panthers have a new head coach as well. They hired Tampa Bay Buccaneers former offensive coordinator Dave Canales. Is he going to be able to save Bryce Young's career? Jim Harbaugh, He also was recently hired not too long ago. I'm going to tell you guys my reasons for why I believe he's going to turn the Chargers into a championship contender. Eagles fans are outraged. And I'm going to be debunking the NFL's biggest conspiracy, which I just think is absolutely ludicrous that people believe this, why the Lions can exploit the 49ers, and we're going to get into some Deion Sanders talk as well on this episode. Welcome to everybody that's tuned in. If you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we are not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast, and you can find us on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review. Share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy. And let's get into it. So, all right. Shout out to everybody in the chat. My guy, Falcons fan forever, says, I was thinking he could have stayed. He's been a coordinator in the past. Yeah, man, I don't think it's too bad of a hire, but before we get into the Falcons hire, I want to talk about this. The Carolina Panthers have a new head coach. His name is Dave Canales, formerly the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was a pretty good hire for Carolina, considering the fact that you weren't going to be able to get any of the big names out there. Bill Belichick didn't even want to interview with you. You weren't going to get Mike Vrabel. And you definitely weren't going to get Jim Harbaugh. So the best that you could do was come away with Dave Canales, who did a really good job in his one season calling plays for the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield went from an afterthought to putting himself in firm position to get a massive payday when free agency comes around. Dave Canales, he runs a quarterback-friendly system. He spent a lot of time with Seattle. As a matter of fact, he spent 10 years with the Seattle Seahawks. He was a big part of Geno Smith having that career season out of nowhere. He also had a little bit of an impact on Russell Wilson having success later on in his career with the Seattle Seahawks. And you look what he did with Baker Mayfield this season. It has to give you nothing but confidence about what he could potentially do for Bryce Young. Bryce Young, in my eyes, was a generational quarterback prospect. And the Bryce Young that we saw last year in Carolina was not the Bryce Young that I scouted when he was coming out of Alabama. And a large reason for that is because he had shit coaching. Frank Wright was one of the worst head coaching hires of all time based on how that thing transpired. He was Urban Meyer bad. And we remember how bad Trevor Lawrence was his rookie season when he was getting coached by Urban compared to how good he was in year 2 and so forth with Doug Peterson. Dave Canales, even if you're not a big fan of the hire because he doesn't really have a proven track record of being able to call plays and have success, this is still better and the upgrade from what you had last year with Frank Wright. Frank Wright took everything that was good about the Carolina Panthers from the previous season and made it worse. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't protect the quarterback. This offense was just non-functional. Dave Canales, he runs a QB-friendly system. He's going to find ways to get Bryce Young going early into his career. He can get him outside the pocket, utilize play action. He should be able to get the offensive line playing better. Tampa Bay's offensive line was pretty good when it came to pass blocking, but run blocking was not their specialty, and they didn't have any success running the football at all. But that wasn't really because of Dave Canales. That was mostly due to Tampa Bay just not having the horses up front to be able to have a sustainable run game. The Carolina Panthers are getting a better head coach who has a better understanding of how to get Bryce Young in situations to succeed as compared to Frank Wright. I know this dude is very young. Not too many people know about Dave Canales unless you're a Panthers fan. Then you will remember him when he was calling plays for Tampa Bay. And the big pushback that I saw against this is, oh, wow, how smart is it to hire an offensive coordinator that only scored 9 points against you? That isn't the point, people. You can't judge how good somebody is based on what they did when they were coaching up against you. Because the situation that the Buccaneers had this season, they weren't even supposed to make it to the playoffs, let alone have a winning record. They were expected to be taken for Caleb Williams. They were in cap hell. So Dave Canales, was able to do the most with what he was given. To turn Baker Mayfield from being a journeyman quarterback into a serviceable starter in the span of 1 year is really impressive. And he did the same thing with Geno Smith. This dude has Midas touch when it comes to what he does with quarterbacks. And Bryce Young, you couldn't ask for a better head coach based on the list of candidates that the Carolina Panthers had a realistic shot at being able to hire. You weren't going to get a Jim Harbaugh or a Bill Belichick. We know David Tepper is not that good of an owner, and right now, he's starting to trend towards Dan Snyder territory. This is the best hire that the Panthers were going to get when it comes to finding a head coach that can find a way to get the most out of Bryce Young while specializing on the offensive side of the football. My big question is going to be, are they going to be able to keep defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero? That was the only good thing about Carolina last year was that defense. If they can keep him and they get some more wide receivers, improve the offensive line, hopefully Dave Canales not only can save Bryce Young's career, but he can figure out what the hell is going on with Kim Ekwonu. This is a A- hire, in my opinion, for the Carolina Panthers. You weren't going to get any of the elite targets out there. The best you were going to get was going to be this guy. And he had a really good one season calling plays for Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield was not that great until Dave Canales and Sean McVay got their hands on him. And when you have a guy who can do what Dave Canales did in Tampa with Baker Mayfield in the span of 1 year, you got a pretty solid football coach. Is he going to be able to win a lot of games? Is this going to translate into success? That would be to be decided. But if I had to give you a prediction early on of how I feel Dave Canales is going to pan out for Carolina, I think this could be a decent hire. Could he lead this franchise to a Super Bowl? I don't really know about that, but I do know that he knows what the hell he's doing offensively. When I listened to him in his offseason press conferences last year, he talked about how he wants to run an offense that isn't complicated for the players to learn. And his offense doesn't have all kinds of different plays and whatnot. They run similar plays out of different formations. And that's going to help a guy like Bryce Young better adjust to the NFL with him having to once again learn a new system in his second season in the league. Dave Canales is going to tailor this offense to what Bryce Young does best. And that's what Bryce Young needs. This hiring process for Carolina was never about getting a big-time head coach. Nobody like a Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick was going to want to work with an owner this bad as David Tepper. He's throwing water on fans. You really think that Jim Harbaugh and Bill Belichick, two grown-ass adults, were going to want to coach for that? Come on, man. Some of y'all were being a little bit unrealistic with who you are actually going to be able to hire. This was a pretty good hire for the Carolina Panthers. You got a young up-and-coming offensive-minded coach who also got interviews elsewhere. It wasn't like this dude wasn't wanted, and I thought that he was probably going to go to Seattle. So, Bryce Young getting Dave Canales as his head coach for year 2 is a blessing in disguise from the football gods. I expect Bryce Young to have a big year 2 with Dave Canales being his head coach, man. Frank Wright was Urban Meyer bad. Everybody keeps making it seem like the Carolina Panthers made a horrible decision taking Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud. But C.J. Stroud, let me give you a news flash, he would have been dog shit too if he was playing for the Panthers. He may have been a little bit better than Bryce Young, but the team still would have sucked. If you got terrible coaching, you're not going to have that good of a team. They had no receivers that could separate, for crying out loud. Adam Thielen, at 33 years old, was their number one option. That's the problem. Dave Canales is going to do God's work with Bryce Young. And this job was not as unattractive as what people make it out to be. If you were to ask the majority of scouts and NFL executives out there who they would have selected number one, most people would have went with Bryce Young. This dude was sensational at Alabama. He's the best quarterback that Alabama and Nick Saban ever had. And there were so many people who were quick to flip the switch on Bryce Young when things started to go left, not giving this dude the benefit of a doubt that he's in a terrible situation with a terrible team around him. Dave Canales is at least going to be able to fix the bad play calling that Bryce Young was receiving. And if the Carolina Panthers can go out there in free agency, get a guy like T. Higgins, maybe hit on a couple of good receivers in this upcoming draft, which this is a really deep receiver class, and improve this offensive line, this is going to be a pretty serviceable football team next year that Dave Canales is going to have. This team isn't far away from being a playoff contender. Right now, their defense is pretty solid. A lot of their work this offseason has to go into that offensive line and the wide receiver room. They improve that. This instantly could be a team that wins 7 to 9 games year one under Dave Canales. But this is an incredible hire for a dude like Bryce Young, who was given Frank Wright, who at that point just completely lost all sense of what it took to be a successful head coach in the National Football League. Frank Wright didn't know what the hell he was doing last year, and it made a lot of sense why the Indianapolis Colts gave that dude the pink slip really early during his final season. They didn't even let this dude get to like the mid-season, pretty much. Jim Irsay kicked his ass to the curb after the first couple of weeks of the season. He was like, you know what? I've seen enough of this. The Panthers, they made a bad hire with Frank Wright. You're going to have a chance to correct your mistake with Dave Canales. And if this dude ends up not working out, then not only are you going to be in the market for another head coach, but you're going to be in search for a new franchise quarterback also. This hire is going to have a big impact on how the trajectory of Bryce Young's career goes. But Bryce Young, if Dave Canales can end up bringing the best out of him like he did Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, he's going to play at a top 10 level. CJ Stroud, how well he played this year was not that big of a surprise to me. Bryce Young should be able to have a great season in his own right, his second season. Both CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I expected to be top 10 quarterbacks right out the gate as soon as they took their first snap of NFL action. CJ Stroud lived up to that because what he have? Great coaching. His offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, he also has been in the running for a lot of head coaching jobs. You got DeMeco Ryans, a stud young head coach. The Panthers on the other end, they had an awful coaching staff outside of Ejiro Evero. They had a terrible team around Bryce Young. The Panthers gave the formula to how not to build around your young quarterback. Dave Canales should be able to make up for the sins that this organization committed when they drafted Bryce Young. This was a good hire in my book. Not a big name hire, not a flashy hire, but it's a good one. Dave Canales knows what he's doing. Once again, he was able to have Baker Mayfield playing the best football of his career and Geno Smith also. Dave Canales, I give this an A- hire considering how bad of an owner David Tepper has shown to be, at least up to this point. And with the situation that Dave Canales is going to be inheriting, it's not like this dude is inheriting a Super Bowl caliber roster. He's inheriting a quarterback that needs his footprint in order to succeed in the league. Because Bryce Young, his confidence without a doubt has to be shot from what transpired year one. So Dave Canales was the perfect hire for Carolina based on what they were going to be able to get. And also somebody who can come in and fix Bryce Young and have this dude playing up to the level that he should be as a former number 1 overall pick. Now, on the other hand, staying in the NFC South Division, the Atlanta Falcons hired Raheem Morris. Who? Raheem Morris? That's a weird way to spell Bill Belichick. And it definitely ain't a good way to spell Arthur Smith. But here's the thing. Arthur Smith was a really innovative but bad head coach when it came to this Falcons team. He didn't know how to maximize the talent that the Atlanta Falcons had. Raheem Morris on the other end, he's a defensive-minded coach, but he does have a good amount of experience on the offensive side of football, and that's something that many people are overlooking about this hire. Arthur Smith was an offensive-minded guy. Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded guy. Everybody was thinking that the Falcons either needed to get Bill Belichick, a proven head coach, or get an offensive-minded coach, and they opted for the latter with Raheem Morris, who I think it's a good blend of both. You have somebody who not only is really good on the defensive end, which the Falcons defense was pretty solid last year, but Raheem Morris could take this unit to a different level. The Rams had a phenomenal defense considering all the young players that they had on that end of the ball. There are so many rookies that had standout performances this season thanks to the coaching of Raheem Morris. And Raheem Morris is one of those coaches that many fans don't know about. And initially, when you looked at the news of this hiring taking place, you probably like, bro, why wouldn't they hire Bill Belichick if they were going to hire a defensive-minded coach? Bill Belichick is older in age. And with Bill Belichick, maybe he may not be able to connect with the younger players that the Falcons have on this team. Raheem Morris, though, is not as bad as a hire as what people may think. All right, and if I was to give this higher grade, I would give it a B-. Yeah, he failed his first time being a head coach in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he was only 33 years old. He's 47 years old now, so he's had a decade and some change to learn and reflect on what went wrong in Tampa Bay, and I'm pretty confident that he's a way better coach now than what he was when he first became a head coach. And he also was the interim head coach of the Falcons back in 2020. He led them to a 4-7 record after they fired Dan Quinn, starting out 0-5. He already has familiarity with the organization, the owner, their expectations. The Falcons are not too far off from being a playoff football team. All they need to do is fix the quarterback position, hire a good offensive coordinator, and this can prove to be a really good hire. Many people in the NFL circle, such as players and coaches, they swear by Raheem Morris. They say this dude is a fantastic coach when it comes to teaching players the game, getting the most out of his players. He's one of those coaches that's going to inspire you, and he's going to bring the best out of you. He's not a Mike Tomlin type coach per se, but he has a little bit of the Mike Tomlin qualities that you look for in good leadership. Arthur Smith wasn't one of those coaches that looked like he was great at galvanizing the troops. He just looked like he was a technical head coach that knew a lot about offense, but just overthought the room too many times. He tried to be the smartest guy in the room, and it backfired majorly. Raheem Morris, he knows what he needs to do to succeed with his second head coaching job. And another coach in this division that failed his first go around that was better the second time he got hired was Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles, he had a 10-win season in New York, and then after that, everything just completely went off the rails, but he became a defensive coordinator behind Bruce Arians for a couple of years. The Buccaneers handed him over the keys to the Lamborghini, and they've won the NFC South for 2 straight years in a row. Raheem Morris, if he can bring in a good offensive coordinator, get the quarterback position right, there's no reason why this hire shouldn't prove to be successful. This was a pretty decent hire. It's not as bad as what I initially thought when I first saw the news, because when it first was reported that this was who they were going to hire for their new head coach, I was a little bit confused because I thought Bill Belichick to Atlanta was a sure thing. I saw the reports about how in the first meeting he was on the Atlanta Falcons owner yacht and it went pretty smooth and they were bringing him back for a second interview, but I guess they felt like Raheem Morris was a better fit for the culture that they want to build as in comparison to a coach like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick doesn't have that many years left of being able to coach. He wants to catch the legendary Coach Shula. And maybe him and the Falcons just didn't see eye to eye with the personnel, how they were going to run things. And you got to remember that Bill Belichick has been a general manager for his whole entire stint that he was in New England. So if you hire Bill Belichick, you're giving up a lot of control. Raheem Morris isn't a control freak. He's probably going to let Terry Fontenot assemble the roster and he coaches the talent up. So I like this hire by Atlanta. You know, when I first saw it, I was like everybody else, what the fuck are they doing? This ain't Bill Belichick. This ain't Pete Carroll. This ain't Mike Vrabel. Who the hell is this dude? But I thought about it and I sat on it, and I believe this is a hire that people need to give the benefit of a doubt. Because there are way too many people on social media who are former players and coaches and are coaching in the league right now that are saying that Raheem Morris is a fantastic football coach. So I'm going to go with the public and what everybody in the NFL circle is saying about Raheem Morris. And he should be able to turn things around, getting this second opportunity. Hell, Dennis Allen went 9-8 his second stint as a head coach with the New Orleans Saints. This dude was very young. He got a big-time opportunity that he wasn't ready for, but it's not like he had no success at all. His second season with Tampa Bay, they won 10 games. So it's not like you're getting a head coach that doesn't have the ability of being able to win at all. He's shown the ability to lead a team to a winning season. It's just that, is the consistency going to be there? Raheem Morris, you're taking over a team that has a lot of young weapons to work with offensively. You got B. John Robinson, Tyler Algier at running back, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. All you need is a good quarterback in there. Rather, if you find that in the draft or if you get that via free agency, which I don't know who the hell you're going to get in free agency because there ain't really nobody all that great out there outside of Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins potentially. Maybe a Russell Wilson, if you want to draft a quarterback, then bringing in Russell Wilson would be a pretty good move. But if Raheem Morris gets OC and quarterback right, this is going to be a hire that people who were trashing it are going to look back and they're going to scratch their head and they're going to say, you know what? I was wrong. He has great charisma, gets along with the players. All of his former players love him. Jalen Ramsey was tweeting up a storm about how good of a coach Raheem Morris was. Same thing with Brett Coleman. So the people that are in the NFL have a lot of respect for Raheem Morris. And that's the common theme that I hear about Raheem Morris. Every head coach out there always has a lot of respect and admiration for him. He was one of Sean McVay's closest friends. So I believe in Raheem Morris, and I like this hire a lot more than what many people do. Like I said, this isn't the best hire they could have made. Bill Belichick, I still believe, would have been a better hire than Raheem Morris just because he's been to 6 Super Bowls. He knows what it takes to win at the highest level in this league. But Raheem Morris isn't that bad. All right, you probably, if you were a Falcons fan, were hoping that you were going to get a proven head coach that already has a great rap sheet. If you weren't going to get Belichick, Mike Vrabel would have been a good fit, but he was going to bring in Arthur Smith as his OC, so obviously that wasn't going to work out. Ben Johnson, I thought he would have been a good fit in Atlanta, but it looks like he has his eyes set on Washington and working with a new quarterback via the draft. But Raheem Morris is a pretty decent coach. He was a really good defensive coordinator the 3 years he was calling plays on that end of the football for the Rams, including calling a defense that led to them winning a Super Bowl. Last season may have been one of the best coaching jobs that we've seen from a coordinator in the NFL last year, with all of the young pieces that Raheem Morris had to work with on that defense. And for that defense to play at the level that it did was really impressive, because normally when you have a defense with a lot of young players, you're going to have a lot of inconsistency. You're going to have a lot of missed assignments, blown assignments. But that wasn't the case for the Rams. Their defense was really well coached. They were disciplined. And that's a testament to how good of a coach Raheem Morris truly is. He's a great communicator. He's a great teacher. These are all of the qualities that you're looking for in a great head coach. Being a great head coach isn't all about how much do you know offense, how much do you know defense. People seem to forget that being a great head coach also involves having good people skills, being personable, being somebody who can connect with your players, being somebody who can elevate a player when they're down after a bad play, or being somebody who can keep players level-headed in the midst of success. Raheem Morris, he's been with this franchise for a long time. In the past, he got hired when they first brought in Dan Quinn back in 2015. He was their assistant head coach, their passing game coordinator, the wide receivers coach, then became their defensive coordinator in 2020. This dude knows it all. Not just defense, but a little bit of offense as well. He learned from his first failed try being the head coach. Now let's see what he's going to do with his second opportunity, being the head coach in the NFL. Now, let's move on to this. LA Chargers fans should be extremely happy with having Jim Harbaugh as their head coach. You now finally have been giving a head coach that understands what it takes to not only build a winning franchise, but to build a championship franchise. Let me remind you guys that his first 4 seasons with the San Francisco 49ers, he led them to 3 straight NFC championship games and the Super Bowl. He knows how to win. He's won everywhere that he's been. Stanford turned them into a respectable program when he left. San Francisco was a Super Bowl contender the 3 years and some change that he was there until his final season. And then he goes to Michigan and leads them to a national championship. It took him damn near a decade to do it, but you know what they say, better late than never. Jim Harbaugh is one of the best head coaches that ever coached the game of football, in my opinion, in recent memory. Not only does this dude know how to win, but he knows how to build a good culture in the locker room. What the Chargers have been lacking the last couple of years with their previous head coaches, Brandon Staley, Anthony Lynn, none of those guys knew how to build a great culture. Harbaugh knows how to build that. He also knows how to build a tough and physical football team, something that the Chargers have never been in years. I can't remember the last time I ever can recall saying, yeah, the Chargers are a tough physical football team. You don't want to play them. They're nasty up front. And you're also going to have a head coach who's going to improve one of the biggest deficiencies that you've had on offense the last couple of years, which has been your lack of success running the football. What does Jim Harbaugh specialize in? Getting a lot out of the run game. The run game hasn't been there for the Chargers the last couple of years, and that's why Justin Herbert hasn't been able to have the amount of success that people expect him to have at this point in his career. Not winning a playoff game, not being able to get it done in big games is because the Chargers don't know how to play complementary football. That's going to change with Jim Harbaugh in the building now. If you think that the Chargers are going to rank in the bottom half in rushing yards per game in 2024, you're about to get a rude reality check, because they're quickly going to flip from one of the worst rushing teams in the league to one of the best with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh puts a lot of emphasis on being tough, being physical, and running the football. And best believe, with him having Justin Herbert as his quarterback, this is going to be a franchise that's going to be competing for Super Bowls for the next 5 to 6 years. You're in a division where you got Sean Payton and Andy Reid, 2 of the greatest offensive minds in the history of the sport. You got 2 great head coaches, and you are going to need a guy like a Jim Harbaugh to be able to get you out of a division like that into the postseason. You weren't going to be able to survive in a division as tough as what the AFC West is, with 2 future Hall of Fame coaches, with guys like Brandon Staley, Anthony Lynn, and whoever else you hired prior to Jim Harbaugh. This is the best hire that the Chargers have ever made in the history of their franchise. And I stand with what I said earlier. Jim Harbaugh is one of the greatest football coaches ever. May not be one of the best coaches in NFL history, but if we're talking about discipline, that's everything that the Chargers need, because that's the areas that this franchise has been lacking in. They're going to give Jim Harbaugh full control, so whoever's going to be their GM, they're pretty much going to be doing their job for Jim Harbaugh, listening to what Jim Harbaugh wants, the players that he wants in his system, that he wants in his locker room to build his culture, and they're going to go out and get those guys. Yeah, he may have a little bit of a weird personality. He may not mesh well with everybody, but we're not all for everybody. Not everybody's going to like us. You're not always going to be the most likable person in the room, depending on who you are, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is, can you find ways to have success? And that's what Jim Harbaugh does. And I think that the whole Jim Harbaugh personality thing is a little bit overstated, because when he was getting into it with the 49ers front office, none of those guys had success after they got rid of him. So why does it matter? And also, the people who bring up Jim Harbaugh cheating at Michigan, bro, who gives a fuck? Honestly, him getting in trouble in college isn't going to have anything to do with him having success in the NFL. Pete Carroll got in trouble right before he took the head coaching job for the Seattle Seahawks. And he was getting in trouble, getting all kinds of violations handed down by the NCAA. But it didn't matter because he moved on for greener pastures in the National Football League. So if you think that him getting caught with the whole sign stealing thing is going to have a big factor on how successful he's going to be as the head coach for the Chargers, I think you're either a little bit misinformed about the difference between the college and the NFL game, or you're just a Jim Harbaugh hater. I don't know which category you may find yourself in, but I will hope that it's just you may just not understand the differences between the collegiate level and the NFL level, because when these NFL executives and these owners are interviewing these coaches, they don't care if you got in trouble in college. All they care about is, can you come in and turn their team into a championship contender? Can you make fans want to come to the games? And that's the two boxes that Jim Harbaugh checks off. I promise you that there aren't going to be too many games with Jim Harbaugh coaching in where the Chargers are going to be playing a home game and it turns into a away game. Fans should be excited to watch this team play because you have a coach who's going to give you something that you've never gotten the last couple of decades, and that is a team that's going to be ready to play against good teams, that's going to be well coached, that's going to be disciplined, and somebody who's going to be able to elevate Justin Herbert and turn him into a superstar. That's something that's really underrated about Jim Harbaugh. We talk about his toughness, his physicality, how he's able to turn teams into juggernauts up front. But what gets overlooked is how good he is with quarterbacks. Alex Smith was a bust before Jim Harbaugh arrived in San Francisco. He turned him into a Pro Bowl caliber QB. Colin Kaepernick, haven't heard of that dude ever since he took a kneel for the national anthem. When Jim Harbaugh left, that's all we knew about Colin Kaepernick. He was kneeling for the national anthem. He got blackballed out of the league. He's been trying to make a comeback ever since. So that shows you just how good of a coach Jim Harbaugh is when it comes to getting the most out of his quarterbacks. And I can only imagine how good of a quarterback Justin Herbert is going to become with this dude being the head coach. Now the Chargers are going to be able to finish off teams in the playoffs. You're not going to have any games that you're going to lose due to ginormous leagues being blown. Jim Harbaugh specializes in elevating the quarterback, elevating your team in the trenches up front, offensive line and defensive line included, and making sure that your team is prepared and well coached in big games. So I believe that Jim Harbaugh is going to turn the Chargers into Super Bowl contenders right away in year one. You got Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams potentially when he gets back fully healthy, if you don't get rid of him. And this was an offensive line that, when they were fully healthy, I believe was pretty talented. It's just that they didn't play up to that level of talent all the time. And you're going to now have a complementary offense that's going to be balanced, not just overly relying on Justin Herbert to win you the game. Now you're going to be able to give Justin Herbert a little bit of some assistance when it comes to him having a run game. That's another reason why the Chargers have struggled to close out games, because how are you going to be able to win games when you're up by a touchdown, but you can't take time off the clock to seal the game because you can't run the football effectively? So when you got to throw the football to keep drives alive and you can't control the clock, of course you're going to end up giving up a good amount of comebacks because you can't run the football. Running the football is really important. It may not be as important in today's NFL as it was in the 90s and 80s, but damn it, you still got to have somewhat of a run game. And the Chargers haven't had that in years. Jim Harbaugh is going to fix everything that has been wrong with the Chargers, not just last season, but that has been going on with this franchise for decades. They have a true head coach in there that not only is going to make fans want to pay money to support the team and actually show up to the games, but you also are going to have a coach who players are going to be able to buy into and that they're going to believe in. We didn't really see these players buying into Brandon Staley, and that's why they got embarrassed in Brandon Staley's final game coaching for the LA Chargers on Thursday Night Football. You're not going to have that with Jim Harbaugh. You're not going to have a team that isn't going to have a good defense anymore. I don't know who he's going to bring in as his defensive coordinator. Jesse Minter could follow him from Michigan, or he could end up getting another good defensive coordinator. Jim Harbaugh, all I know is that expect the Chargers to be competing for Super Bowls sooner rather than later. And in a division like this, you were going to have to go out and get a big-time head coach like Jim Harbaugh. I'm really excited to see how the AFC West is going to play out in 2024. We're going to have Antonio Pierce with the Raiders, who many people like, who many people believe can have success. We got Jim Harbaugh now with the Chargers. Justin Herbert, this is going to be his quarterback. Now you're going to have not just a good head coach, but you're going to have one of the best head coach quarterback duos in the league. Where would you rank Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert amongst the better QB head coach combinations in the league? Because I definitely believe they got to be top 10, aren't they? Jim Harbaugh has a proven enough resume in the National Football League that you can't say, man, we don't know what he's going to do in the NFL. Because, I mean, when he last was in the NFL, he went to 3 straight NFC championships and the Super Bowl. And seeing him going up against Sean Payton and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes every year is going to be must-watch television. I love Jim Harbaugh. This is one of my favorite head coaches of all time. I love his personality. It may turn off a lot of people, but I love the fact that he's a little bit outside the box. People who tend to be outside the box are people who I think tend to be the most successful at what they do, because they're not, what's the word I want to use? They're not somebody that thinks like everybody else. They're somebody that has a different wiring that allows them to see things from a different perspective. And that's what Jim Harbaugh has. And that's why he's been able to win damn near everywhere he's been. Stanford, San Diego State, Michigan, San Francisco, back when they were relevant. So when you're somebody who has a little bit of a unique personality and you're considered a little bit outside the box, a lot of the most successful people in the world, 9 times out of 10, are outside the box thinkers. Jim Harbaugh, I can't wait to see what this dude is going to do with the LA Chargers. I'm not a Chargers fan, but I've been praying to the football gods for this to happen ever since the middle portion of the season. I want to see, as a true fan of the NFL, what Justin Herbert can do with the great head coach. He now has that with Harbaugh. Before we move on, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel, we're a podcast, and you can find us on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoy the content and you want to support us, all we ask is that you give us a 5-star review and share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Hit me up on social media. You can find me on X at JT_, and on Instagram at JT_. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode of the podcast, you can send them in the DM on X and Twitter. All right, let's move on to this. I got into a heated argument with a friend of mine a couple of nights ago because he called me and told me, JT, the NFL is rigged. And this is the biggest conspiracy theory that I always hear about the NFL. Oh, the NFL and the refs are always colluding with each other to make sure that Vegas never loses. And this is so far from the truth. And I always laugh when somebody's favorite team loses and their first excuse is, oh, it's rigged. The refs wanted the other team to win. That's bullshit. Because if the NFL really was rigged, the Dallas Cowboys would have way more success in the postseason than what they do. Because the NFL is rigged because they want to maximize their ratings, right? Well, the Dallas Cowboys are the most popular team in the National Football League and one of the most popular sports teams in America. So you would think that if the NFL truly was rigged, that Dallas wouldn't continue to get embarrassed in the postseason like they do every single year since the damn 90s. And if the NFL was rigged, we would see teams like the Steelers and some of the NFL's more bigger brands going further in the postseason. The NFL has no reason to rig their games. All right, the NFL is as popular right now as it ever has been. Every year the Super Bowl comes on and they reveal how many viewers are watching from worldwide. It always ends up being a new record. Every single season, the Super Bowl always exceeds the previous viewership number that it did the previous season. So there's no reason for the NFL to have to rig the outcome of games. And let's say if the NFL did, why would they not have more of their popular teams going further in the postseason? Let's be honest, bro. The Detroit Lions aren't really insanely popular. Nobody really has cared that much about Detroit until they hired Dan Campbell, and he had that press conference about biting kneecaps, and you just look at the rise of the Detroit Lions. They've quietly become America's team because they're the team that people like to root for. They're a Cinderella story. Hence the reason why the NFL doesn't have to rig these games, because whatever storyline they get, people are going to care about. The NFL is just so big that no matter who they get in the Super Bowl, it's going to be a win-win situation. Let's say you get a team that's a small market franchise, like the Jacksonville Jaguars that make it to the Super Bowl. From a casual standpoint, you would think, bro, who the hell cares about watching the Jacksonville Jaguars? Don't nobody want to see them. We'd rather see a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Kansas City Chiefs. But here's why. It still would bring in high viewership for the NFL. Everybody loves a great underdog story. So when you got a team that comes out of nowhere and has success, people get behind that. People want the underdog to win. That's why so many people remember those Eli Manning and New York Giants teams for taking down the New England Patriots and Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, because they were the underdog. If the NFL was rigged, you really thought that the NFL would allow the Giants to take down one of the greatest teams in NFL history in the New England Patriots when they were undefeated at the time? Come on, man. Not once, but twice. Like, this isn't making sense. You see, the NFL is only rigged when your favorite team loses. But when your favorite team wins and you get assistance from the officials, oh, it's not rigged. You see, I remember my freshman year of high school, my head coach used to always tell us, don't blame the refs. If you don't want the games to be close, don't allow the officials to dictate the outcome then. You see, people think that the NFL seems to be the only league that has problems with bad officiating. We got bad officiating in the NBA, in college football, and high school football, middle school football. Hell, when I played junior Pee Wee Pop Warner, they barely called any flags. I started to question if they even had eyes that were functional. There is bad officiating on every level of football. You can say that, well, the NFL doesn't want to do anything to fix it. What's the difference between having part-time referees and full-time referees? People just think just because these referees will be full-time and they can have an opportunity to watch more film that they're all of a sudden going to become better. Officiating is one of those things that it comes down to personal judgment. A lot of these calls are not set in stone. How one officiating crew views pass interference calls, another officiating crew will have a different philosophy of how they view pass interference calls. That's why you have referee crews that call games more tight and referee crews that call games a little bit more loosely. You see, having full-time referees doesn't necessarily mean that the NFL is going to get better officiating. Officiating has been terrible in the NFL for years, and it's been terrible in the football world in general ever since football first became a thing, because anytime you have things that come down to personal interpretation, you're going to have inconsistency. You're never going to get a game where you see a perfectly called football game where the referees want to get every call right. Even if we were to replace referees with AI robots, yeah, the penalties that get called will be a little bit more accurate, but there still will be mistakes made. When you have humans involved in any kinds of decision making, there's going to be a lot of flaws. There's going to be a lot of errors. I don't think it has anything to do with the fix getting put in and these referees purposely calling games for a certain team to win for a desired outcome. Because once again, if that was the case, if the NFL truly is rigged, somebody please tell me why the Dallas Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl in HD yet. The Cowboys last won a Super Bowl when VHS and video cassette tapes were popularized. They haven't won the Super Bowl in the HD era, and I don't even know if they're going to win the Super Bowl in 4K anymore. By the time the Cowboys reach another Super Bowl, we're probably going to have 8K television screens invented, people. Like, if the NFL was truly rigged, Some of the NFL's most popular teams will go way further than what they do in the playoffs every single year. People think, man, the NFL has to have their golden boy Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. There's been plenty of games that Patrick Mahomes has lost fair and square. He lost to Joe Burrow. People still watch the hell out of that Super Bowl. This whole conspiracy about the NFL being rigged, scripts being wrote in is bullshit to me. And I know plenty of players that play in the NFL right now that will tell you that these outcomes aren't scripted. You may have a call that goes against you that may cost you a game, but it's not scripted. The NFL has no reason to script these outcomes. If the NFL was rigged, they would be a lot smarter with making sure that their most popular teams like Dallas doesn't get embarrassed and blown out on national television Sunday night against the 49ers. The whole Super Bowl fiasco between the Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons, the Falcons choked that game because the coaching just went down the drain once they got that big of a lead. It's hard to accept the fact that, maybe your favorite team lost because they weren't good enough to get the win that day, and it's easy to put the blame on the referees or the game being rigged. If that's what makes you feel better about your team losing, if that's your way of coping and getting over a loss, then that's cool. But you're wrong. The NFL is not rigged. Well, how do you know it's not rigged? There's plenty of players that have played in the NFL that have podcasts that will tell you that it's not rigged. When that Houston Texans running back came out, Arian Foster, I believe his name was, and he said that the NFL was scripted, he didn't even believe that shit, man. He was just trying to be funny, but people took it and they ran with it. But the NFL doesn't have to conspire to get desired outcomes, because regardless of who's playing in the Super Bowl, the NFL wins regardless. Everybody in the media is going to craft different storylines that people are going to get behind to get them invested into watching the Super Bowl. You see, the NFL is as big as what it is, not because it's player driven, but because it's team driven. When you're watching teams play, you're watching not all because of one player, but because you have a lot of love and passion invested in supporting said team. You see, if the NFL was rigged, way more teams that don't win enough would be winning a lot more. Like the LA Chargers are in one of the biggest media markets in the world, and they suck. Come on, man. Some of y'all just want to find a way to put the blame on anybody else but your team not being able to get it done. The NFL wins regardless. And even when it comes to the whole Vegas thing about Vegas ain't trying to lose money, doesn't Vegas win regardless of who gets betted on? If I take the Baltimore Ravens plus 3.5, right, or minus 3.5 to beat Kansas City, and Kansas City wins instead and they cover, isn't Vegas getting paid regardless? Because somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. If you took Kansas City to win plus 3.5, you won and Vegas won. But Vegas doesn't lose because the Ravens didn't cover minus 3.5. They're still making money regardless. And the NFL is still going to get watched regardless of who plays in the Super Bowl, because people get behind any storyline. You don't need a sad player there or a sad team there to make the Super Bowl watchable. I remember the most excited that I've ever been to watch the Super Bowl, I believe, was 2013. We had the number one defense in the league, the Legion of Boom, or the Legion of Doom, whatever they called it, with the Seattle Seahawks going up against one of the greatest offenses in the NFL history, led by Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos got absolutely crushed in that Super Bowl. You think that the NFL expected that to happen? You thought that the NFL would rig the whole entire season to get the number one defense versus the number one offense just for a blowout to happen? The NFL doesn't like blowouts. It would be in their best interest to rig games that they know are going to be competitive. There have been Super Bowls that have had teams that nobody wanted to watch, but we still were invested in watching because we're fans of the league. You really think the NFL will rig the league for Cincinnati to get to the Super Bowl? For what? Who the hell wants to watch the Bengals in the Super Bowl? No disrespect to Cincinnati fans, but I'm just trying to understand the logic of the people who say that the NFL is rigging games on purpose. The NFL doesn't have to rig anything. They win regardless. Regardless of who plays in the Super Bowl, we all still are going to watch. Regardless if Patrick Mahomes is in it or not, we're still going to watch because the NFL has never been popular, people. If there's any league that needs to rig games, it's the NBA right now because their ratings are declining nearly every single year, it seems like. The two most popular sports in America are the NFL and college football. They run America right now. It's them and everybody else. There's no reason for the NFL to have to rig games because they're going to win regardless. Storylines are what gets people invested in the game. And as somebody who's going to college, studying media, studying communication, and how these leagues go about building up hype for their big events, it doesn't involve them rigging outcomes just so they can get the desired Super Bowl that they think everybody's going to want to watch. If you got an underdog in the Super Bowl that nobody saw coming, people are going to root for that team because they love rooting for the underdog. Everybody loves an underdog story. Everybody loves a David versus Goliath matchup. But if you get a Super Bowl between two heavyweights, then that doesn't mean that it's rigged neither. It just means that you have two of the best teams in the NFL squaring off in the Super Bowl. But the NFL is not rigged. And there's plenty of players that have came out and said that it's not rigged. It's hard to rig an NFL game. No game you can just go into and say, oh yeah, like we need this team to win. Make sure that it happens. Because you know how hard it is to do that? You literally will have to call flags on every single play and make it pretty obvious that you want said team to win. And I'm going to say it one last time before we move on. If the NFL was rigged, why haven't the Cowboys been in more Super Bowls? Because they are the biggest team in America, and it's all about ratings. It's all about making the most revenue, right? So why wouldn't they have their biggest cash cow playing in their biggest event of the year if it's rigged? Come on, man. I was telling my homeboy that, and he kept saying, it's still rigged, it's still rigged. Saying that the NFL is rigged, I really believe is disrespectful to the players that invest their blood, sweat, time, and dedication in the game of football. You think that these players are willing to put all this time in just to lose on purpose because the NFL says they have to? Come on, man. This ain't wrestling. This ain't the WWE. This is the NFL. This is real life. So if you believe the NFL is rigged, then you're welcome to have your opinion. I'm pretty sure there's going to be plenty of people in the comment section that have all kinds of articles and all kinds of weird ways of explaining how and why the NFL is rigged, but it's hard to rig an NFL game. But if saying that the NFL is rigged is the only way you can get over your favorite team losing and that's how you cope, then cool, that's your way of coping. But all I'm here to tell you is that it's a lie. The NFL is not rigged. Have there been referees that have been paid off? Of course. But same thing has happened in the NBA. That's just sports. But the NFL does a really good job at making sure that they maintain the integrity of the game. That's why they don't want these players betting on any games, including the coaches and the refs. So if they are so hard on gambling and they have this strict gambling policy, that's to ensure that they don't have anything the equivalent of insider trading. Because when you have players that gamble on the games, it ruins the integrity of it. And the NFL is all about integrity. They don't have to script anything. If you want to watch something that's scripted, watch wrestling. If you want something that's real, with real outcomes that aren't predetermined, you watch college football. You watch the NFL. You can't predetermine who's going to win an NFL game if you're the National Football League, because you have to call penalties on every single play to ensure that that team can get the win. If you play football and you understand how the game of football works, you want to be calling the NFL rigged. I think the majority of people that say that the league is rigged have never put on the helmet and some damn pads. And I wish that a lot of people that say this who haven't actually did play football. Because if you play football, you will understand how hard it is to rig a game. You need so many things to go a certain way to rig a game. It's different variables, and there's all kinds of variables that are involved in rigging an NFL game that just makes it impossible for a predetermined outcome by the NFL that actually come to actuality. That's why we have upsets. If we didn't have upsets, then I will understand the NFL being a little bit scripted, but they just don't pick and choose who's going to win and lose. These coaches and players are not only playing for championships, but they're playing so they can provide money on the table for their families to eat and to survive. Coaches get fired every single year. We see quarterbacks get their jobs taken every single year for not being able to win. It's way too much money involved in this thing for the NFL to be rigging these games and jeopardizing the livelihoods of their employees. Eagles fans are really pissed off with who they hired to be their new defensive coordinator. Vic Fangio, him and the Miami Dolphins parted ways a couple of days ago, and as soon as they parted ways, 2 seconds later, the Philadelphia Eagles hired them to be their new defensive coordinator. And I get the outrage from Eagles fans about this decision. Vic Fangio, I will agree that he has become a little bit overrated. His defense has been used by half of the defensive coordinators in the National Football League, and most of the Vic Fangio disciples out there that utilize the Fangio 6 defense, they don't have tons of success. There's been a lot of DCs that have gotten fired trying to implement the defense that Vic Fangio runs. And the big problem and criticism with Vic Fangio's defense is that it doesn't use a lot of pressure. It doesn't blitz a lot. It's not blitz heavy. It's kind of conservative, which allows the quarterback to get a lot of things underneath, but it limits all the big plays. But when you look at the Dolphins defensively this year, they gave up 50-something against the Baltimore Ravens. They had some games against the Buffalo Bills, like early on after they dropped 70 against the Denver Broncos. Buffalo and Josh Allen put 40 on them. But the main reason why the Miami Dolphins defense wasn't that great wasn't because of Vic Fangio's play calling per se, but it was mainly due to them just having hell of injuries. Jalen Ramsey missed a large part of the season, and then you lost 2 of your most productive pass rushers, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, to season-ending injuries. They had so many injuries on the defense side of the football that it was going to be really hard for Vic Fangio to coach a top 5 level defense. But Miami's defense still was pretty solid. They were top 10 in rushing yards per game allowed. They also were pretty good when it came to stopping the pass. They had one of the better pass rushes in the National Football League this year. Is this a A++ hire for the Philadelphia Eagles? No, it's not. There definitely probably was some better names that were out there that you could have gotten. There were some Eagles fans that were DMing me on Instagram saying that Wayne Martindale would have been a better hire than Vic Fangio, and that's understandable, but Vic Fangio is still way better than what you had in the past. I mean, you have Matt Patricia and Sean Desai calling plays for you, and Sean Desai is supposed to be a disciple from the Vic Fangio system. And it looks like you want to run that style of defense anyway, so why not go ahead and get the godfather of it? Plus, he served as a consultant for the Philadelphia Eagles last year for a few weeks when they were going into that Super Bowl matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. And Philadelphia wanted to hire him full time, but there were some things that didn't allow them to, and he ended up going to Miami. Now, the reason why he got fired from Miami wasn't because he sucked. He did a really good job with that defense considering the injuries. At one point, he had a top 10 defense. The reason why they fired them, and it really wasn't him getting fired, it was a mutually parting of ways, was because, there were some things about how Mike McDaniel ran the Dolphins that Vic Fangio probably didn't agree with, and there were some players that he didn't get along with. When you got a head coach that's old school like Vic Fangio, and there's some things going on that you don't agree with, it's going to lead to a mutually parting of ways. It seemed like Philadelphia was always the place that he wanted to go anyway. So I was even shocked that the Dolphins were able to get him. And he's one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the league for a reason. His defense definitely is going to be way better than what you were getting out of Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia's first ever game calling the defense for Philadelphia, they gave up a 10-play, 92-yard game-winning touchdown drive to Drew Lock on Monday night. So if you're an Eagles fan that's outraged about this, you got a reason to be a little bit upset, but you shouldn't be getting all worked up over this hire because it still is an improvement and it still is a pretty good hire. Is it an A++ hire? No, I do agree with you guys who say that Vic Fangio is overrated. Now, I'm not going to say that he's majorly overrated. I'll say he's just a tad bit overrated. His defense has lost a little bit of his luster. I don't believe that he makes the best second half adjustments. But this is a defense that is pretty good. And for the Philadelphia Eagles to get a defensive coordinator that could have this defense playing at worst, a top 15 level, is an improvement in my book. And really, the question for Philadelphia's defense is going to lie with, are they going to be able to improve the secondary? Because the corners were dog shit. You had injuries on the back end of the secondary. You were banged up at linebacker. There was a lot of reasons for the Philadelphia Eagles not having a good defense this year. Injuries and bad hires made by Nick Sirianni was one of them. Vic Fangio was a safe hire. You know that the worst you're going to get out of Vic Fangio is a top 15 defense. Bare minimum. At best, the Philadelphia Eagles, if they improve the secondary, they revamp the pass rush a little bit, they bring in some younger guys, because you got guys like Fletcher Cox who've been playing in the NFL for damn near 40 years, still playing. If you could get younger and you improve that secondary, Vic Fangio could make the Philadelphia Eagles one of the most improved defenses in the National Football League in 2024. I understand the outrage, but there's nothing to get too worked up over. Vic Fangio is still one of the better defensive minds in the National Football League. He's well respected amongst coaching circles. And you can say that they could have done better, but there's only so many defensive coordinators that you can say right now are better than Vic Fangio, who you could have gotten. So if I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm clapping my hands because this was a fantastic get for Nick Sirianni. And it definitely is going to be a way bigger improvement from who the hell you had calling the plays last season. And hell, I would go on the bat and say that Vic Fangio possibly could be a better defensive coordinator than what Jonathan Gannon was. When Jonathan Gannon got that Arizona Cardinals job, there were plenty of people saying that he wasn't that good of a coach and he was only that good because of the talent that he had to work with. And we saw who was right in that argument. So Vic Fangio, I get that he may just be a tad bit overrated, but he still is going to improve your defense tremendously, and you're going to have a solid defense with him calling the shots on that end of the football. The Detroit Lions might have been given the blueprint to being able to beat the San Francisco 49ers, and you know who gave them the blueprint? It was the Green Bay Packers. When we saw the 49ers last week barely escape with that W against Jordan Love and the Packers, what went wrong for the 49ers? Well, for one, they couldn't get after Jordan Love because Green Bay had a really good offensive line. 2, they couldn't stop the run. And 3, their secondary was getting absolutely terrorized because their secondary is average at best. And the Detroit Lions have everything to replicate the same game plan, if not better, than what the Packers did last week. You got a elite offensive line. The Detroit Lions are one of the few teams in the NFL this season that you can truly say had elite offensive line play. You're getting fantastic quarterback play out of Jared Goff. How Jared Goff has played for the Detroit Lions the last couple of years has been absolutely outstanding. He's been a top 10 QB this year. He's efficient. He can kill you in a quick passing game. He's also really accurate, delivering deep passes downfield. You got great receivers. So you look at how much success the Green Bay Packers had throwing the football against this San Francisco 49ers defense. Detroit should have the same amount of success, if not more success, because you got a better offensive line. The 49ers, you look at all of the big names that they have on their pass rush. Nick Bosa, Arik Armstead, Chase Young. Nick Bosa has had a down year this season. Chase Young hadn't even heard of the dude ever since they first gave up a third-round pick to acquire him. If you can neutralize the pass rush of the San Francisco 49ers, you can move the ball on this defense. Yeah, they got a really good group of linebackers led by Fred Warner, but the 49ers defense only looks good on paper. When they go up against an offense that can hold their own up front and minimize the amount of pressure that they can generate on the quarterback, they find themselves in a lot of trouble. And prime example, last week, look at what Jordan Love did to that secondary. Charvarius Ward is, in my opinion, the most overrated cornerback in the National Football League. He's not terrible, but he's not great. He probably, to me, is a top 20, top 25 cornerback. But some people may argue that he's a top 15 corner. I don't think he's that good. And with the injury that they had to Hufanga, that also was a big blow to that secondary. And Steve Wilks, he's a good defensive coordinator, but he's no DeMeco Ryans. Going up against Ben Johnson should absolutely dominate when it comes to the matchup between him and Steve Wilks as play callers. And plus, another thing that the 49ers don't do well defensively that Detroit does fantastic offensively is stopping the run. Detroit has pretty much the best 1-2 punch in the NFL at the running back position. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is lightning. He's a threat to take it to the house every time he touches the football. And David Montgomery is thunder. He's not looking to get all of the big, explosive, flashy runs that Jahmyr Gibbs gets, but he's one of those running backs that's looking to get the football, get north and south with the ball, and run your ass over. The 49ers couldn't stop Aaron Jones last week. Aaron Jones, the way he played, you would have thought that he was the second best running back in the NFL on the other sideline across from Chris McCaffrey. The 49ers have so many big weaknesses that makes me surprised that they're a 7.5 point favorite against the Detroit Lions, because I truly believe that the gap between these two teams is not 7 points. If I was an odds maker, I would have the 49ers favored by 3 points. Because your defense, unless you can get a consistent pass rush, isn't going to be able to slow down Detroit's offense. The only reason why I believe the 49ers are going to be able to get this win, and I don't say it with a lot of confidence that they're going to win, is because I don't trust Detroit's secondary at all. Yeah, I shitted on your secondary not too long ago, but you got a decent, average, maybe above average secondary at times when everybody's playing well. But for the most part, I think you have an average secondary. The Detroit Lions have a below average secondary. Outside of Brian Branch and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, their secondary sucks, man. You had Kirby Joseph, who I was a big fan of. You know, he's somebody who kind of had a great rookie season, and then his play has kind of dwindled down the stretch the last couple of years. Your cornerback play, Cam Sutton, against Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, the 49ers should just automatically bomb him anytime he lines up against one of those two guys. Anytime you got Cam Sutton matched up on anybody, teams run whoever offense on him. And they were running whoever offense on him last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he did have a couple of big plays that he made, but he gave up a lot of big plays also. He's not that good. The Lions don't have a dependable secondary. The only thing about their secondary that they do well is force turnovers. That's about it. This is one of those games that I believe is going to come down to whoever gets the last possession on offense. If the 49ers get the ball last, I believe they're going to be the team that wins the game. If Detroit gets the ball last, they're going to win the game. Detroit just has so much talent offensively that when we look at how the 49ers defense played last week against Green Bay, they should be able to replicate that same formula that Green Bay was able to execute against this defense, take it, expand upon it, and make it better. There's not a single thing that the Packers did last week that the Detroit Lions aren't going to be able to do against San Francisco. San Francisco is one of those teams that gets hyped up because of the big names that they have, because they have so many players that are considered to be the best or one of the best at their position that it's easy to overlook their flaws. But there are a lot of weaknesses that the 49ers have on the defensive side of the football that can be exploited. And I believe that the Detroit Lions have a great chance to exploit those weaknesses, and they eventually could maybe walk away with the upset. I would not be surprised if the Detroit Lions win this game. I've been saying it all year. I've been saying it all week long that don't count out the Detroit Lions. Like, for the people that are taking the 49ers to cover -7.5, you got some big balls. Not saying that that's going to be the wrong decision, because I definitely could see the 49ers running away with this game in blowout fashion. But Detroit, just with how much talent they have on offense, having Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator, who a lot of people believe could be the second coming of Sean McVay, I'm just going to have a hard time seeing the Detroit Lions getting rolled over by San Francisco. They can run the football. San Francisco is not good against the run. They do a great job at protecting Jared Goff. The 49ers got a good pass rush, but it's having a down year compared to how good that pass rush has been in previous seasons under DeMeco Ryans. And two, their secondary isn't that good. The Lions have a really good group of receivers and a lot of weapons to work with in the passing game. You got to worry about Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jahmyr Gibbs can also be a factor in the passing game. Detroit definitely has the blueprint to being able to pull off this upset. Last thing I want to talk about is this. Colorado going into 2024. I believe a lot of the Deion Sanders haters out there are about to be in for a massive disappointment this season, because there's no way that Colorado is going to win anything less than 7 games. And the over-under win total came out not too long ago for every team this upcoming college football season, and Vegas has Colorado at an over-under win total of 6 wins, which is a huge leap from what they were expected to win last year, which was only 3.5. And for the people that think that Deion Sanders and Colorado aren't going to have any success in his second season in a weaker conference, I really believe that you're just a flat-out hater and you just don't want to give credit to where credit is due. Colorado has done a great job in the transfer portal at improving the offensive line, getting better on the defensive line. All of their biggest weaknesses that they had last year are mostly going to be fixed going into next season. Well, what about the cornerback play? A lot of the guys that they got from the transfer portal and that massive transfer portal rebuild that Deion did when he first got there are still on the team, and they could get better with good coaching. And I believe that Deion Sanders is a good coach. It's just that there were some things that he had to learn. There are some things that he's going to have to fix and improve and change. He's going to have to hire better coordinators, offense and defense. But for the most part, I still believe that what he did year one for Colorado was a huge accomplishment. The only reason I don't give him a A+ or B+ grade for how his first season in Colorado went, and why I give him a C, is because I feel like he did a bad job at managing the hype. He did a bad job at keeping all the players in his locker room level-headed. This season, I definitely believe that you're going to see a team that's going to be more focused. They're not going to let the limelight get to them. They're not going to let a little bit of success get to them. And when you look at Colorado's roster in the Big 12 compared to the other teams that are in the Big 12 right now, there's not a big gap. As a matter of fact, I probably would go on a limb and say that Colorado probably is going to be the third most talented team walking into kicking off the 2024 college football season, only behind Kansas State and Utah. That's about it. Kansas is losing a lot of veterans from last year's team. They got Jalen Daniels coming back, but they're not going to have a lot of experience. UCF, Arizona just lost their head coach. Like UCF, they have a lot of hype around them right now. And they just got KJ Jefferson out of the transfer portal, but they got a lot of holes that they got to fix. There are so many teams in the Big 12 that are the equivalent to what Colorado is right now. You don't really know how it's going to look. But what I do know is that there aren't too many teams in the Big 12 that have a proven quarterback, and nobody has a quarterback remotely as good as what Shedeur Sanders is. And when you have Shedeur Sanders in a conference like the Big 12, you should win the majority of your games just based on that. Consistent quarterback play is key to winning in college football. And now they're going to be able to protect Shedeur Sanders this season. Not only do you get some really good transfers on the offensive line out of the portal, but you got Jordan Seaton, the best offensive tackle from this past recruiting class. So this is an offensive line that's going to be massively overhauled, massively revamped. You're going to have some more talent coming in at wide receiver. They just got LaJohntay Wester. I don't know if many of you guys know who LaJohntay Western is, but he played for the school that I currently go to, Florida Atlantic University, and he was one of the best receivers in college football statistically. He was putting up monstrous numbers, and Tom Herman, I assure you, didn't want to lose LaJohntay. LaJohntay going to Colorado is one of the biggest pickups that Colorado got in the transfer portal. And then what about Kamani McLean? What if Kamani McLean develops and he ends up living up to the high expectations that was bestowed upon him when he was the number one ranked cornerback coming out of last year's recruiting cycle? There's so much talent on Colorado's roster that gets overlooked because of the Deion Sanders hate train. I don't get why so many people have so much hatred towards Deion Sanders and Colorado football. Like, why would you not root for a team like Colorado that hasn't had success in damn near 2 decades to succeed? Like, why is everybody so fixated on Deion Sanders and Colorado football failing? People act like this is fucking Alabama or Georgia football, and they've been dominating college football for years on top of years. Like, you think that more people will pull for Colorado to win. But I get it. You know, Deion Sanders' confidence affects your insecurity. I understand that. And I understand that when Deion Sanders was a player, there were many people who were rubbed the wrong way about his approach to, you know, his game and some of the antics that he had. But Deion Sanders is a great human being, a great coach. The players love him. There aren't too many players that have transferred out of Colorado. And I don't think that anybody on that team last year was jealous of Shedeur Sanders and they were setting him up to get okie doke. Nobody was going to set Shedeur Sanders up to get injured. It looks bad on film. It looks bad if you're trying to make it to the NFL, or if you do want to transfer to another team. Who the hell is going to pick you up if you play badly and you purposely let the quarterback get hurt? You see, Colorado, I expect them to be an 8-9 win team this season. The gap between them and the rest of the Big 12 is not big at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's an even playing field, the conference that they're walking into. The Pac-12 just so happened that when Deion Sanders got to Colorado, had their best season in Pac-12 history. There hasn't been a single year that I can recall the Pac-12 being as deep and as talented as what it was in its final season. You had Oregon, Washington, who are 2 top 5 teams. Damn near could have both made it into the playoffs if it got expanded to 12 teams, right? You had Oregon State, who was really good. You had UCLA, who was pretty solid. Yeah, they had a couple of scary losses, you know, that shouldn't have happened. But what about Arizona? Arizona just won the Alamo Bowl. There were so many great teams in the Pac-12 last year that for a team like Colorado and a coach like Deion Sanders to be able to have a winning record with having to rebuild their team through the transfer portal, it was going to be hard for them to do that. And the Big 12, which is a big step down in talent and competition level compared to the level that the Pac-12 was on last season, like, I don't think many people realize that the Pac-12 was debatably the toughest conference in college football. Yeah, we want to give it to the SEC because the SEC is always so deep and we can use the whole, well, we do the Pac-12 versus SEC head-to-head, who will win. I get that. But if you don't want to say that they were arguably the best conference, I definitely would say they were the second best conference ahead of the Big Ten. The Big Ten only had 3 good teams last season: Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. So Colorado, Deion Sanders walked into an avalanche with how difficult the Pac-12 conference was. It was more difficult than what people initially thought. Going to the Big 12, having a year of experience under his belt, being a Power 5 head coach, Deion Sanders knows what he needs to do and what needs to change. He already has said countless times in every interview that he's done this offseason that they're going to run the football more. They understand that. They understand that the defense needs to play better. Deion Sanders is one of those people that he's not okay with complacency. He's not okay with mediocrity. He wants to win. He's not one of those people that's going to continue to do the same thing that produces bad results. Colorado, if you're a hater of this football program or you're a hater of Deion Sanders, you're about to be really upset with how good this team is going to look in 2024 this season. Shedeur Sanders is going to be potentially the first pick of the 2025 NFL draft, and I'm pretty sure Deion Sanders wants to do everything he can to make sure that he can protect his son's draft status in his playing career, because you can't allow this dude to be getting hit as many times as what he did last season. They've put way too much investment into the offensive line for it not to be improved this season. And let's not even talk about the guys that they got from the transfer portal. Let's talk about the guys that they still have from last year's team that could develop and could get better. Part of having a good offensive line is chemistry. It's not all about talent. You just weren't going to be able to randomly assemble an offensive line from the transfer portal and it just magically be good. When you look at the majority of teams in college football that have great offensive lines, they have a lot of veterans on the offensive line that have played multiple games with each other. Colorado, their offensive line is going to be improved, but I don't know if it's going to be elite. But I do think it'll be good enough for them to have way more success in a conference that doesn't play a lot of great defense and isn't really that great up front. There were tons of Pac-12 teams that had way more talent than what Colorado had in the trenches. Big 12, not the same story. We know what the Big 12 is. It's the conference of all offense and zero defense. Now, they played a lot more defense now than what they've done in previous years, but still, the only teams that you can say are going to have a good defense in this conference are going to be Utah and Kansas State. And those two teams so happen to be the two favorites to be on top of the conference. Like, Arizona has a new head coach. Like, they lost Jed Fish. I don't know how good of a head coach that dude from San Jose State is going to be. Colorado, to me, they're an easy pick to finish in second or third place in the Big 12 to me, just off the fact that they got a better team that's still as good as what the rest of the conference is, but they have the quarterback advantage. And when you got the quarterback advantage, there's not a single game that you shouldn't be able to win. Colorado winning more than 6 games to me is easy money. I told you guys last year, take Colorado to win over 3.5 games. And I'm not a professional gambler. I'm not a financial advisor, but all I'm telling you is that if you're looking for some free bread and you're looking for some easy money in your pockets, take Colorado over 6 wins next year. It's going to happen. They just have way too much talent for them to be a 6, maybe 7-win team. This team has the possibility to win the Big 12. Like, yeah, that's how good Colorado's going to be this year. And the rest of the conference isn't that great. Like, there's not a big gap in talent between Colorado and everybody else. The only team that has the biggest talent advantage over Colorado is Utah. That's it. So, Colorado is going to exceed expectations once again because the haters just can't stop drinking enough of that haterade. Put that haterade down. It's not good for your lungs. It's affecting your judgment and it's clouding your vision. The Buffs are still coming, people. Deion is still coming. And in a couple of more months, we're not going to say Colorado's still coming. Colorado's actually going to be here. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed this episode, we would greatly appreciate it if you give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Hit that like button and subscribe before you get your way on out of here. And real quick, I just want to say that I appreciate all the support that we've been receiving on the channel. You know, there are so many people that always DM me and say, oh, you need more views. Like, we're working on it. You know, I've been experimenting with different thumbnails and different titles. So I believe that success is going to come in due time. Like my old high school coach used to tell me, everybody wants that overnight success. Everybody wants to shine, but nobody wants to grind. You know, you got to put in the time so you can shine. And, you know, eventually everything's going to happen in due time. We've been getting a lot of sponsorship and partnership deals. So that's a sign of something. So I believe that we got a lot of great content coming on the channel, despite the fact that football season is about to hit that dead period. You know, we're not going to have any football anymore for the next 6-7 months of the season, but we still have tons of great content planned. And I just want to say that I appreciate all of you guys for sticking through and supporting the channel. Hit me with a follow on X and Instagram if you ever want to reach out to me and connect. I normally check my DMs the majority of times, unless you're just sending like hate hate messages or you're just trolling, then I won't respond to it at all. But if you got a genuine question that you would like answered on a future episode, hit me in the DM on X and Instagram, JT Sports __ JT Sports _ is my Twitter and X handle. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in